of Toriyama's memory, especially considering how beloved his work is by people from all walks of life.
Okay, so we can all agree that this book is factually correct. So, Dragon's Dogma 2 coming out this week? Yes, it is, on Friday. That's why I was so adamant at replaying the first one with Dark Arisen. Okay, before we get into Vanquish, because, as you've seen in the thumbnail, I wanted to talk about a little bit about Akira Toriyama, because I actually was thinking about formulating something a little bit deep about his whole passing and the effect of Dragon Ball on just about everything in culture. But I couldn't find the right words. But luckily for me, a channel that I appreciate quite a lot has made a video on him, which is Mother's Basement. Last time we did was his deconstruction of the Avatar live action, but this time it's on quite literally the man who changed the world. Now, if you were a kid like me who grew up a little bit in the 90s and saw the actual rise of Dragon Ball and how it influenced every other anime around it, Toriyama's passing would have affected you quite a lot. I actually was at a loss of words for many days because I just didn't know what to say. Like, I jokingly talked about that a little bit, covering another video saying how it is similar to like the passing of MJ and so many other people in the past because it was so influential. There are just about nobody that I know around the world that I could talk to who does not know about Dragon Ball. As an example, I actually just got a message from a fellow student of mine, not a student of mine, but a fellow student that I studied physics with, and his name is Majid. He's from Uzbekistan, and we used to joke a little bit because there's an anime called Captain Tsubasa that has to do with football, but in his language it's translated to Captain Majid. But like when we were to talk about anime, actually the first time that we met, we literally talked about Dragon Ball. Total strangers connecting on a thing that should not be working, but we did, and it was sort of magical. So, this video here is from Mother's Basement on Akira Toriyama, the man who changed the world.
Every artist wishes they could one day make something as impactful as Dragon Ball. Akira Toriyama's martial arts magnum opus defined a genre, influenced several entire generations, and created a truly iconic cast of characters who will endure in popular culture for decades to come. With a style that 4 decades later is still the first thing that comes to mind when most people hear anime.
Indeed, Olivier Tom. Of course, Frenchman, you're right there. And also in Brazil, I remember the connections. If I say the name Aldebaran, who are you thinking about? Maybe that might be just a little bit too specific, but that's a character in Senseiya, which is an anime that kind of aired a little bit before that, but also around the same time with Dragon Ball. But yeah, pretty hot, that show as well. But you could connect with people through those things, and like they knew immediately what you were talking about. My God, Dragon Ball in Brazil, in South America, is something else. It's literally something else. Like, we might have gotten a thing of a wave that struck like Europe or Africa as well, but again, coming from a once French colonized country, but because of the whole relation, I got to see a lot of Dragon Ball through something called Club Dorothy, which then later on changed into a channel called Manga for some years. And yeah, that was how I was introduced to it. And of course, France and Japan has a lot of good relationships, so it made literally freaking President Macron hailed Akira Toriyama after his passing. He tweeted about it. Like, it's fucking weird.
Few artists would have the audacity to even dream of doing that twice, but Toriyama was built different. He didn't dream, he did. Before he even drew his first rough sketches of Son Goku, he was already one of the most successful mangaka in history, thanks to Dr. Slump, an uproarious comedy about a sardonic super robot girl and her dirtbag dad that, alongside Rumiko Takahashi's Urusei Yatsura, redefined what gag manga could be and helped cement their place as the dominant species of shonen manga. A title that Arale's defective descendant Roboco still defends valiantly to this day. Not content to simply reshape a single medium twice, though, Toriyama also helped Yuji Horii invent the JRPG with Dragon Quest just 2 years after launching Dragon Ball, and he's kept quietly working on video games ever since, including one that's considered by many to be the greatest JRPG of all time.
Fuck yeah.
In fact, he just got done supervising a very cool-looking open-world adaptation of his manga Sandland that's due out next month. Because even at 68, even with more you money than 50 of me would know what to do with, even as his health was apparently failing behind the scenes, Toriyama still had so much left to give the world. Forget artists, few human beings, period, across all of history have made an impact like Akira Toriyama. Looked on as a god among men, even by other gods of manga, like the late, great Kazuki Takahashi. You know how you'd probably collapse into a gibbering mess of spaghetti if you ever met the creator of Naruto or One Piece? That's how they felt when they met him. Bro,
that's the thing. That's literally the thing. Dude, One Piece. I don't know how One Piece would have looked like if Dragon Ball did not exist. Nor Naruto, for that sake. Or it's called the Boruto's dad. It's incredible. I have no idea. Like, it's amazing. The path that he has shaped for so many people.
Eulogized by the government of China. Not like Chairman Xi made a tweet about how he personally really loved the manga. I mean, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs made an official statement on his passing. They're not the only government either. And
there it is. Emmanuel Macron was like Akira Toriyama and his millions of passionate, fans who grew up with him today. That's beautiful, man. Like, literally, the president was like, hey, I see you. Rest in power, man.
And this isn't even the first time he's been the subject of international diplomacy.
Yeah!
It's almost impossible to overstate what Akira Toriyama's work meant to the worlds of comics, animation, video games, pro wrestling, model kits, hip-hop, Latin American politics, and more. But I'm only barely qualified to talk about those first three things, so that's what this video is going to be about. And believe me, that'll give us more than enough to cover. His influence truly reached everywhere. Even this video's sponsor wouldn't be what it is without him. The Promised Neverland is one of those rare Shonen Jump manga that truly broke the mold. A tense, high-stakes potboiler thriller that explodes out into this wild, action-packed adventure before eventually transforming into things I'm pretty sure you won't want spoiled for you, at least not now that the whole story, plus the prequel mini-book We Were Born, is conveniently available in this delectably collectible boxed set.
What do you know?
Demizu Pozuka's strikingly sketchy art style has always been one of the Promised Neverland's strongest selling points, and now you can put some of her most arresting color spreads on your wall with the included double-side poster, and on your shelf with this.
Dude, don't start. You mentioned Miura and oh no. This dude, Oda did say about Toriyama, if I can find a tweet, that he hopes that wherever he goes, that heaven is how he pictured it. May heaven be as joyful as he envisioned it. Oh my god, it's too much.
This gorgeous display piece, blown up big enough to make hunting for all the clues and Easter eggs she likes to hide in there a little easier. Yazzie and I spent like an hour staring at this.
The light going out was like a premonition for the Promised Neverland. It's a dark manga. The anime adaptation for season 2 is not good, but the manga is good.
Now, here's where I'm supposed to segue out of the ad and into the first segment of the video, but where do you even begin exploring a legacy as legendary as Akira Toriyama's? Entire genres, entire mediums would not be what they are today if not for his work. Almost every property he ever touched is uniquely and enduringly iconic, and sure, on the global stage, one character stands head and shoulders above the rest, but in his native Japan, everyone knows Arale can beat up Goku, though, and as icons go, both of them pale in comparison to the undisputably greatest character design of all time.
Shut up.
By drawing just 5 wonky circles and 2 dots, this man single-handedly ensured that no Japanese role-playing enthusiast would ever have to fight anything as boring as a level 1 rat ever again. But of course, it's not that easy, is it? Toriyama just made it look that easy. Anyone, literally anyone, can draw the Dragon Quest slime, but only an absolute genius could have designed it. The elegant drop-like silhouette, the perfectly proportioned features offset just enough to create a
simplicity was key.
Shine on one side. He basically invented an aesthetically superior smiley face that's just as easy to reproduce as the original, and yet fully copyrightable. Pikachu and Mickey Mouse ain't got shit, and that's just one extremely marketable aspect of a series that literally built a genre and has sold millions with each entry for decades without ever really changing its core design, largely off the back of Toriyama's timeless aesthetic, which has also sold millions upon millions of a lot of other things, come to think of it, and been imitated and iterated on by even more artists than that around the globe, from countless deviant artists to his fellow Jump mangaka to the most successful character designer in human history, Game Freak's Ken Sugimori. So maybe that's where we should start, with Toriyama's easily imitable art style and the inimitable skill with which he used it. Toriyama's work was defined by bold, distinctive, expressive characters built from clean, simple shapes, with sparse, impressionistic backgrounds and well-balanced, high-contrast page layouts that emphasize readability over story density. Using varied levels of detail within the art, for example, placing realistic guns and cars next to cartoonier characters to direct and reward the reader's attention. Controlling...
One of the beautiful things about him was that he had a very good mixture of what was both the Western influence of Hollywood, the sci-fi aspect that was very much blooming at the time, like stuff like Alien and other sci-fi, and of course the traditional Japanese art that I guess artists was trying to move a little bit away from at the time. So yeah, it was truly amazing.
Your eyeballs the way a master cinematographer controls a camera. Often his characters would interact with the panel borders, giving the page a sense of 3D depth, which he'd enhance using bold, eye-catching, sometimes English word art for sound effects and signs. It's very much a graphic designer's approach to making manga, which only makes sense since Toriyama studied design in high school and even worked in advertising for a bit. And while that obviously wasn't his passion, given the eventual career change, graphic design is what gave him his billion-dollar edge in the weekly battle for manga magazine readers' eyeballs. Most mangaka of Toriyama's time were trained in more traditional Japanese arts, if they trained at all, that is. Only natural, since manga as we know it today was a newborn medium at that point. Likewise, graphic design as a formalized discipline only reached Japan after the war, around the same time as much Machiko Hasegawa and Osamu Tezuka were busy mothering and fathering modern manga. Born in 1955, just 4 years after Astro Boy, Toriyama was among the first generation of Japanese artists to grow up immersed in manga culture with access to a formal education in design. And unlike most of his anime and manga-loving peers, Toriyama made 2 key choices growing up that set him up for success. Firstly, he found other interests besides anime and manga, chiefly film, both of the giant Japanese monster variety
Yes, the only true Godzilla.
The Hollywood kind. In particular, war films, westerns, and sci-fi. His all-time favorites were reportedly Alien and Galaxy Quest. So, yeah, even the man's taste was goated. Because Toriyama's interests moved away from cartoons as he grew, the things he drew were more varied than most of his 10-year-old contemporaries. While his classmates were learning how to draw Astro Boy better, he was learning how to draw real boys and girls and celebrities he liked, and cars and guns and tanks and landscapes and all sorts of other real stuff that made him better at drawing anime and manga.
Yeah, it really shows.
A nerd, but not too much of a nerd, and that directly informed his second great life-changing decision to skip college because school is for nerds. Instead, at 20, he jumped right into the workforce as a professional graphic designer, which taught him two invaluable lessons by the age of 23. First, he learned what does and doesn't work in real-world advertising scenarios, knowledge that would soon make his manga stand out from the crowd. And second, he learned that he absolutely f***ing hated working a 9-to-5, something most of us don't realize until we're too many student loans deep to do anything about it. But Toriyama could quit his job, and so in 1977 he did, and immediately started submitting manga to Shonen magazine contests for quick cash. He ended up being disqualified before he could make any, but his ineligible Star Wars parody was nonetheless good enough to catch the eye of Shonen Jump editor Kazuhiko Torishima, who took him under his wing to develop something more original for the magazine. And that thing was, of course, a huge and immediate flop. Wonder Island, Toriyama's first published one-shot, came dead last in Jump's popularity.
Oh my god, I see the inspiration for so much here. Character design that were adopted by the maker of Ranma 1/2. Certainly, I think so, yeah.
Polls, and its sequel didn't fare much better. It took another year for him to find even modest success with cutesy gumshoe Tomato-chan, and comparing the two, it's not hard to see why it shook out that way. Wonder Island is aggressively strange in both its subject matter and style, combining, for the time, avant-garde paneling choices with a barely coherent plot about that one Japanese soldier who didn't know World War II was over for a lot of years, meeting a caveman on that island he was stuck on, and character designs that, they have a certain undeniable Toriyama charm, but if it's 1978 and you have no idea who Akira Toriyama is, they'd probably just look weird and ugly. You say tomato, I say tomato-chan is an 18-year-old gyaru who made Police Detective because it's a gag manga, don't worry about it, surrounded by even less competent cops who love to goof off and make Godzilla jokes. A solid setup for a situational comedy if I've ever heard one, though, as we'd soon see, Toriyama could do much better.
There we go. Dr. Slump.
So that's where Sonic got it from. Arale Norimaki is a little girl who happens to also be a hyper-advanced robot because her dad is a very lonely inventor and who also has to wear glasses because he's not very good at it. Also, for some reason, Dr. Senbei Norimaki really wants to keep her nature a secret from the rest of Penguin Village, even though the place is just
quite literally
chock full of the weirdest weirdos you've ever met. From talking animals to aliens to definitely not Superman. But then, of course, it is just plain funny when an obvious robot pretends not to be a robot and everyone believes them somehow, and laughs are Dr. Slump's top priority. What's that ordinary teenage?
Yeah, that was half the fun of watching Dr. Slump, because even as a kid, like you did not need to like have any comprehension. Like it was just straightforward. You understood how stupid the plot was, but it always took you on a ride.
Teenager doing behind me. Anyway, the point is, Penguin Village was this limitless comedic playground where pretty much anything could happen, and Toriyama could just run wild with his charmingly scatological, fourth-wall hostile sense of humor, which is still as hysterical in 2024 as it was in 1980. Even as an adult, every chapter of this manga feels like I'm getting away with something. It's just pure joy in illustrated form. And if you're a Dragon Ball fan thinking of finally giving it a shot now, take this as your sign to pull the trigger. Often, when you first start reading them, it can be hard to see why exactly certain smash hit manga took off. Not so with Dr. Slump. The cover image of the manga's irascible mascot hanging off the titular doctor's exasperated face is both eye-catching and an incredible art flex, at once showcasing Toriyama's remarkable ability to draw realistic clothes and facial details, and his very deliberate choice to draw cute little unshaded gremlins instead, blending the two styles together seamlessly. If you know anything about art, this one cover is all you need to see to know this guy's worth.
That was a weird thing also that came to be. I remember we used to have that contest in school to try to draw a certain panel from like shows and or anime that we used to enjoy, cartoons as well. Inevitably, a lot of it ended up looking a lot like Dragon Ball because that was most influential for the boys at least, where the anatomy of such things like the body structure of like Super Saiyans was super cool, but as is, but like of course the faces were different because it was again that mixture of what was accurate and anatomically correct and the cartoonish.
Following, but even if you don't, the first page will hook you anyway. Using just 17 words, including the mailbox and sound effects, it manages to convey everything we need to know about the main characters and their relationship dynamic in a single brilliant joke. The layout of the page is expertly designed, even by modern standards, with cleverly placed tangents like the mailbox post running into these wires that draw your eye across the panels with exacting precision so the joke always lands. The lack of background detail in most of the shots means that when you stare at the page at a glance, the characters in those panels and the house at the top instantly stand out, while the bottom panel, with all the clutter of the lab in the background, doesn't really read until you focus on it, at which point you realize, hey, that girl don't have a body. It takes a true master of the form to successfully deliver a visual punchline like that without hiding it behind a page turn. But by pulling that magic trick off, Toriyama made one of the most instantly accessible manga ever. By the time you're done scanning the magazine to see what's worth reading, you already know Dr. Slump's core characters, and they've already made you laugh. If you took the first 2 pages of this manga and put them in Jump today, they would still draw readers like flies to a poop. Speaking of poop, you see that poop? The cutesy, swirly-whirly, ice cream-looking cartoon blob thing? Akira Toriyama popularized drawing poop like that, and was quite possibly the first guy ever to put eyeballs on it. Meaning, the poop emoji itself is a Dr. Slump reference. In the same way that you can't order a sandwich anywhere on Earth without giving the Heinz Corporation at least a little money, you cannot send a text or tweet without being exposed to Akira Toriyama's immense influence. Are you starting to see how deep this rabbit hole goes yet? Well, we're not done yet. Speaking of brands, and rabbits, and holes, Dr. Senbei happens to have a favorite brand of
we have him to blame for the poop emoji. Oh yeah.
dirty magazine, Playboy. And I don't mean like a McDonald's-style copyright-safe parody. We're talking actual Playboys with the English logo and everything.
Yeah, that was their
endorsed
lot.
by Playboy's Japanese publisher, Shueisha. Fun fact, editor Toriyama only ended up working on manga in the first place because he wanted to work for Playboy. So that was actually a very early example of cross-promotional brand synergy. And so, most likely, was the appearance of a Playboy bunny suit in this early gag about the Penguin Village Middle School Gentlemen's Club, which almost certainly led to him drawing Bulma in a bunny suit later on, and that, along with Daikon 4, definitely led to a lot of bunny suit hentai being drawn. Now that's what I call a cultural impact. Emphasis on the culture. And we're still nowhere near done. Something you've probably noticed about Dr. Slump's art style by this point is its distinctive proportions. You might even recognize them. Chibi, or as it was known back then, super deformed art, is ubiquitous in anime and manga today, often used to punctuate comedic moments, even in more serious stories. And it became so ubiquitous precisely because of Dr. Slump's cute little bobble-headed caricatures of big, scary kaiju and other pop culture icons. It's difficult to say exactly how much credit Toriyama deserves for making chibis happen, as a lot of very important and influential manga from that time have just never been translated, so there could very well be other artists who were making stuff like this back then, and I just wouldn't know about it. One of the only English resources I could find listing anime and manga in the chibi style is the TV Tropes page about chibis, and it doesn't even mention Dr. Slump. Neither does this blog I found about the origin of chibis, although it does posit that the style either arose from the Mobile Suit Gundam fandom, which started in 1979 and didn't really take off until the compilation movies hit in 1981, or in some fun little side comics drawn by one of the animators on Crusher Joe, a movie that Toriyama actually did designs for, and also that came out in 1983. So, considering Toriyama was drawing chibis
Hello Kitty was a bit younger than that.
1977, it's safe to say that he was one of, if not the first. But it doesn't really matter who did it first, because he definitely did it biggest and pushed the style into the mainstream.
Because I do understand that Hello Kitty also originated at some point that was very, what's the word here? Close to Pokemon. So like around the 90s where that too exploded. But yeah, when you see 1987, right? Hello Kitty's from the 90s. So
go on to inspire SD Gundam. It's a little hard to fathom from a non-Japanese perspective, which mainly sees it as the other thing Toriyama did, but Dr. Slump was instantly, insanely huge. A little over a year after the manga's debut, there was already an anime on the air, which, for perspective, took 3 years to happen with the similarly influential Urusei Yatsura. And within a year of that premiere, it had the third most watched anime episode in the entire recorded history of television, with almost 37% of Japanese households tuning in. Dr. Slump was more popular in Japan than not voting is in America. It was so popular that Shueisha flat out would not let Akira Toriyama stop making it and move on to something new, like he originally planned to do after just 6 months, unless he pitched something that could be even bigger. So, over the next few years, Toriyama and Torishima got to work doing just that in what little spare time they had between new chapters. Once each Dr. Slump draft was in, they'd stay up late into the night, drinking, smoking, watching classic kung fu movies, and workshopping a story about a goofy little martial arts guy who would take on and eventually triumph over the whole dang world, both in the manga and in real life.
Oh, okay. From the 70s, my mom owns a lot of the original lineup. Wow. Okay, dang. That's cool. I wish my mom had that. The closest thing that my parents ever came to own actual anime material was my dad once buying some Gundam stuff. I think that was through him that I got introduced to Gundam, but I'm not too sure. Like a kid. But yeah, that's ages ago.
Dragon Ball, gotta find that Dragon Ball.
Oh no.
Don't stop until you got 'em all. The 7 magic balls. It's all you gotta do to have your wish come true.
Damn, that
That theme.
theme song whips ass. Wish I wasn't 4 years old when they aired it. All kids my age got was
Dragon Ball, friends working together, a boy and a girl in a struggle.
This theme, I remember this way too much. I want to say that it sucks, but it's ingrained in my mind. Oh my god. I was expecting him to drop the chala, hey chala thing there, but no, not this one. God damn it. What the hell?
Struggle for truth, Dragon Ball. So come on our journey, the fun and excitement are waiting for you.
And the worst part is that we heard that one in French. In French.
honestly, they could have had Nickelback write the Canadian intro, and I still would have tuned in. Because by the time the OG series hit the English airwaves again, my generation was already Dragon Balls deep in the Android saga. I still remember vividly that momentous day in the summer of '99 when I first met Goku on YTV. Instantly thought he was the coolest dad ever, and shortly thereafter watched him eat a laser beam through the heart and die. It was...
Yes, you know what? I was very envious of Latin Americans. Why? Because just about, I think almost every single anime had the original OP. I remember watching Street Fighter 2V or V2, whatever. Which one is it? Hold on. Street Fighter V2. So this is the intro that most of the world got to listen to, okay? If you were from Latin America, you got to listen to the actual Japanese version. Who wouldn't want to have a catchy freaking soundtrack? What the fuck? Oh man, I don't know what we were screwed over like in English speaking countries or French for that sake, but damn it, so much better.
Was the coolest fucking thing I'd ever seen in my entire life, and I needed more of it injected directly into my eyeballs every week from then on. Also, I bought all the video games. The decision to split Dragon Ball Z off from everything pre-time skip for its North American release was questionable from a narrative integrity standpoint, but from a marketing standpoint, jumping right to the bit where North American kids could see animated murder for quite possibly the first time in their lives was definitely a good call. These moments are burned into the memories of every weeb my age, along with that iconic theme song.
And of course this one.
Dragon Ball.
Wasn't a fan of it. Gotta admit, wasn't a fan of it. Not at all. I prefer the original. But
Dragon Ball.
What, were you expecting Rock the Dragon? Sorry, but the Canadian poverty theme song experience is an integral part of my personal nostalgia. And, of course, every country remembers it a little different, because Dragon Ball was nothing short of a global sensation. One of the first beachheads by which anime and manga truly began their conquest of the international media market, which is one of the biggest economic drivers of the streaming anime era. And
it was the Canadian poverty experience. That's what you just heard. God, I love that phrasing. That was genius.
that's just the start of its influence. If you only look at the domestic worlds of anime and manga, for as much as Dragon Ball did, Dr. Slump is still, by a wide margin, the more influential series. Oda and Kishimoto both cite it specifically, separate from Dragon Ball, as one of the biggest influences on their own sense of humor, as do quite a lot of other writers, mangaka, and animators, because, like, duh, it had more than double the audience share of The Simpsons, albeit in a country half the size. Of course it was gonna have a massive impact on every Japanese thing that's tried to be funny since. Even some shonen battle tropes you'd probably chalk up to Dragon Ball, like the prevalence of tournament arcs, can actually be traced back to silly gag tournaments from Dr. Slump, which got such a positive response from the audience that Toriyama decided to do them again in his new thing. That's
Right. And for some reason, Sailor Moon and some others, the Eurobeat, which weirdly enough really worked. Yeah. Also, as J is pointing out there, it also depended on the days. Like, you will have certain animes that actually had, like Gundam, actually stuck with the original opening, while some others decided to have a dubbed version, which I never really understood. Like, we obviously know that what you are making is not from the country. Like, even as children, we're like, this is not what we know culturally. So obviously it comes from a different language. So just translate the damn thing and leave the opening alone.
That's why the first Tenkaichi Budokai is so silly. But at the same time, I can just say the Japanese name of that arc without any other context, and most of you know what I'm talking about, because on the global stage, it's no contest. Sure, about as many people watched Dr. Slump in Japan as tuned into The Simpsons in America at its peak in the 90s, but more people tuned into this Chinese 40th anniversary New Year's dance thing than live in America now. It's not at all absurd to suggest that Toriyama's contemporary Japanese take on the classic Chinese novel Journey to the West played a major role in healing relations between the two nations, which probably wasn't his intent. One of his greatest charms is he never took himself that seriously, but he and Torishima definitely did design Dragon Ball with broader markets than just Japan in mind.
Now, to be fair, when it comes to the Captain Tsubasa or Oliver Tom situation, you could be very much fooled into believing that because it had to do with like worldwide football. Like the characters were around those countries, right? Cesare from Italy. Even like the freaking uniform that they were wearing kind of had the colors from the countries that you knew. So I could understand that part. If we look at the Japanese jersey, I think it was very much resembling like the French one that was just plain white and some blue stripes, right? So it makes sense.
I mean, Goku was clearly inspired by contemporary Chinese heroes like Bruce Lee and Jackie Chan on top of the Monkey King, as well as Superman, who's also a recurring character in Dr. Slump, just by the way. And plenty of Toriyama's other favorite Hollywood things also made their mark on Goku's journey west and beyond. And in turn, when the comic and animation industries of all those countries began taking more and more cues from their counterparts in Japan, Toriyama's notes were some of the first they copied. Although Penguin Village was visually reminiscent of the California coast, because blue skies and palm trees are easy to draw, baby. The general vibe of Dr. Slump remains distinctly Japanese, or at least Japan does America, you know, like Earthbound or Resident Evil. For Dragon Ball, Toriyama sought to give his story more of a globe-trotting international flavor, taking his heroes from the mountains of China to the islands of Okinawa to the desert to cities reminiscent of both LA and Tokyo, introducing them to a diverse cast of characters along the way, including Chinese and Japanese folk, Russians, Americans, Indians, Native Americans, and Africans. And, like, as representation goes, you can definitely tell he liked Kimba the White Lion and Superman when he was a kid, but it would be crass to dwell on that in a celebration of Toriyama's memory, especially considering how beloved his work is by people from all walks of life.
Okay, so we can all agree that this book is factually correct. Nobody is questioning this one, okay? Absolutely no one is questioning this one. Piccolo is black and that's the way it is. We can all agree. Facts. Facts has been said. Nobody is contesting this. Piccolo is black and thus he's dashing all of the weird stereotypes of black fathers not being there for their sons because he's the true father of Gohan. This is amazing. I need to find this book. Jesus Christ, what the fuck? A memoir on race, religion, and pop culture. Whew.
Life. The excellent Twitter cartoonist and voice of Kenny from Beyblade, House of Decline, once joked that Goku is an international language, and he really wasn't that far off the mark.
Bro, Tournament of Power.
Even Toriyama's depictions of gods and the afterlife, though they draw most heavily from Buddhist traditions, blend aspects of various world religions and his own very quirky sense of humor to create something that doesn't feel of any one culture so much as it feels like Dragon Ball. And regardless of how they feel about any given religion or philosophy, pretty much everyone likes Dragon Ball. Though many don't like, or at least respect it nearly enough. Nowadays, it's a common sentiment that DBZ's a victim of Seinfeld isn't funny syndrome. Many a weeb has said, yeah, it was good for the time, but by modern standards, it's nothing special. And with all due respect to all those weebs, they could not be more wrong. While
Absolutely.
The series it went on to inspire undeniably added many refinements to and cut fat away from the template Dragon Ball laid out, few manga have ever done the whole martial arts adventure thing better.
Literally, the only thing that I can blame Dragon Ball for having done wrong is the pacing. But that had all to do with actually having a show that was going to be shown on television and drawing numbers. That's it. Like charging up to like take a new form or casting a special attack for 2 episodes. Yeah, absolutely annoying. But you cannot tell me that the themes, the way that things were set up, were wrong and are not like consistently working for the times. No, that's just wrong.
I emphasize manga because that version doesn't suffer from the many problems inherent to weekly adaptations that really hold the anime back. I read it for the first time just a few years ago when the Jump app dropped after having watched the anime all the way through twice over and played through its story several more times over in game form, and I was blown away by how effortlessly fun it is to read. Even if you've heard the story 1,000 times over before, no one tells it like Toriyama himself. Your eyes just glide over the page, and it always feels like the art's moving right along with them. Conversational scenes strike a great balance between text and artwork, with at most 3 bubbles per panel before the characters move on in their stage business. And in the action scenes, the dialogue's cut down to a minimum, with art and sound effects alone often being used to both direct the eye and convey every detail of the choreography.
Dude, at our school, when I went to school in Cameroon, we had a dude who was providing us with comic books, because obviously a lot of us did not have access to them, but he was like our comic book connect. That's how I came to know about a lot of DC and Marvel comics, even like the darker version like Marvel Knight and all of those things. And even Vertigo comics when it came to the DC version, like the dark stuff. But when it came to anime and manga, rather said, when I got access to Dragon Ball, like I was reading chapters, like full entire books on my break, and was thinking to myself, I don't have enough lunch money to get the next chapter. So how long am I going to have to wait? And how can I fondle something from my parents to make sure that these guys give me the next book to get access to it? It was such an ease to read through, and there was no time wasted. So he's absolutely correct here.
Dialogue bubbles we do see serving as anchor points where your eyes can pause before the next flurry of fists begins. The mastery of paneling that Toriyama already demonstrated with Chapter 1 of Dr. Slump has been honed here after over 200 straight weeks of practice to a downright godly level of skill, which he leveraged with a much more fluid art style that gradually evolved as Goku grew up from a sleeker take on the chibis of Dr. Slump to, well, basically the foundation of the entire modern shonen aesthetic. A compromise between the clean, cartoony style of his own work and the cool, gritty, mature aesthetic of Fist of the North Star and JoJo. Though that compromise did have trade-offs, and the smaller version of Goku's design does still lend itself a lot better to animation, as the upcoming Dragon Ball Daima beautifully demonstrates.
Bruh. This is going to be so much fun.
That's also a big part of why they turned him back into a kid when the animators took over for Dragon Ball GT.
Yeah.
Which I guess you could argue influenced anime too by being the first Boruto. But regardless, countless modern sports, battle, and adventure.
It was the first Boruto, he's right. It has a lot of good ideas, but it did not execute them correctly. But man, if we ever were to see, like, I have had issues, right, with getting through Dragon Ball Super. I have got to admit it has not been easy. There are some plot points there that I kind of feel like, should we continue with this at all? So to me, borrowing some of the plot points that would have been included in like GT would have been just fine. Example, the whole thing with the corrupted Dragon Balls. Get me Omega Shenron in here. All of those plot, Baby Vegeta in Dragon Ball Super. Whew, I have no words of how badass that might turn out to be.
Manga have adopted styles similar to what we see in DBZ. And even with all of that competition, Dragon Ball's art and layouts still look the cleanest of anything I've ever read, except maybe Bleach. That said, Dragon Ball does undeniably have some issues with pacing, foreshadowing that goes nowhere, and plot points that come out of nowhere, owing largely to how Toriyama made the whole thing up as he went along. There aren't a lot of those issues because he was really good at making shit up as he went along, but more thorough story planning was nonetheless one of the biggest ways that the series he inspired, from Yu Yu Hakusho to the Big Three, improved on the core shonen martial arts concept. But in doing their planning, they all borrowed from his work and codified the shit he made up into genre tropes, some of which the vast majority of mangaka were nowhere near funny enough to pull off, though that didn't stop them from trying. Dragon Ball's impact on the shonen landscape.
Yeah, the whole thing about the female protagonist that is just way too perverted has been a thing. And I want to give him that one, that he might have been the person to popularize that. Because goddamn, young Goku and Bulma, that dynamic, I was very surprised when Chi-Chi was introduced as Goku's wife later on. And that they had a son when Dragon Ball Z started. I was like, oh boy. Okay. This is not what I expected, but you know what? Fine. No. We don't speak about Fire Force here. We don't speak about Fire Force. Why? Because the author who made Soul Eater, one of the most underrated and goated animes of all time, decided to create one that is quite literally amazing, plot-wise, action-wise, but decided to ruin the entire thing with needless fan service. Why? Why on God's green earth would you ever do that? Oh my god, the fan service in Fire Force is like, fine, it exists, but why does he have to ruin every single moment? Like the cat girl whose name that I cannot remember, the chick who always ends up in the weirdest situation, losing her clothes. Why does that happen? Literally in scenes where she should be fearing for her life, they pull up crappy fan service. It's so dumb.
It was immediate and massive. Even Masami Kurumada, who pioneered a lot of non-supernatural battle manga tropes with his seminal boxing series Ring ni Kakero, drew heavy inspiration from Dragon Ball and Fist of the North Star, as well as the then burgeoning magical girl genre, to create
Sensei,
Seiya, which in turn inspired many more magical boy manga like Bleach and Chainsaw Man. And that's just one of the countless evolutionary branches we can trace back to this one manga. Last summer, I made a video about how Akira Toriyama influenced and inspired just the power systems of the next 4 decades of battle manga, ignoring all other tropes and story patterns derived from his work, and it came out to 51 minutes long. So obviously it would take a lot longer than the rest of that.
Ooh, Hunter x Hunter when it comes to power systems. Perhaps one of the best out there. That is actually comprehensive. Like, people are freaking out about Jujutsu Kaisen and trying to understand which curse techniques work how. If you want something that actually has a comprehensive system, go and read Hunter x Hunter. It's complicated, but it's comprehensive.
Timestamp to unpack all the ways he changed the Shonen game, but for now, you can go watch that to get some idea. Oh, but don't click away to watch it just yet, though, because we still have to talk about how Dragon Ball defined an entire genre of video games.
Hold on, the fan service in Fire Force was just to spite the editors because they kept telling him to scale down the action. What? Oh, okay. I was not aware of that. Yeah, because it is a bombastic action show. It's great. But yeah, if only the fan service wasn't there, I could actually bear watching it through and not having to force myself to get through just 2 episodes at a time.
No, I didn't flub that line. I'm not talking about Dragon Quest. Toriyama's art for that series and others did have a pretty sizable impact on how game art and graphics evolved in Japan, but he was no game designer. The genre-defining gameplay loops and narrative tropes of Dragon Quest and Chrono Trigger were not his creations, but a certain other genre was defined by the tropes that he created, which a certain other game strove to emulate. Namely, fighting games. Of course, other martial arts manga and movies were equally influential in the birth of that genre, but it's no coincidence that the most iconic move of the most iconic character of the most iconic classic fighting game is a Dragon Ball reference. Press quarter circle punch to pay respects.
Yeah.
The goal of Street Fighter II and games like it was very explicit. To take all the badass shonen anime and kung fu movie stuff kids loved from the TV and let you actually do it to
King of Fighters.
So naturally, the Dragon Ball license fit the emerging genre like a glove. The 4th, 5th, and 6th generation of consoles would all see multiple fighting
Budokai
games based on
Tenkaichi.
various eras of Dragon Ball. Some pretty legendary, like Super Butoden, some legendarily bad, like GT Final Bout.
No.
Fun fact, that game's the first time I heard that song. The Budokai series on PS2 was arguably the most exceptional of the classic DBZ
With the
fighting
transformations.
games, with a decently balanced combat system on top of substantial single-player content.
The Budokai one was the first time that people started testing the whole thing of alternate transformations. People started making their own branching universes.
Fighting game fan could hardly ask for a more generous package besides like Soul Calibur 2. And for DBZ fans, the Budokai game's what-if scenarios were some of the first original
What-ifs,
official
yes.
content we'd gotten since Toriyama hung up the fountain pen in '95. But even as good as the Budokai games were, something always felt like it was missing from them. The Street Fighter style of gameplay was a fine enough format to capture the look of Dragon Ball Z fights in 2D, but with the characters now rendered in, for the time, very impressive 3D, it felt needlessly restrictive to lock all that crazy aerial laser beam combat to a single plane. So Spike Chunsoft got to work crafting a new type of free-flying 3D fighting game that would finally allow players to, if you'll pardon my game journalist, feel like Goku.
Wow.
Dragon Ball Z Sparking, known as DBZ Budokai Tenkaichi in the West,
Yep.
was the first ever anime arena fighter. Not to be confused with arena fighters like Power Stone, even though a few of those were based on anime, like One Piece, Rave Master, Bleach, and Shrek. In contrast to those top-down, more arcadey titles, anime arena fighters put the player right in the cinematic action, dropping the camera down behind their Goku of Choice's back and mapping all of his iconic moves to simple inputs. And when I say choice of Goku, I'm not doing my usual glib thing about how, you know, all shonen protagonists and a lot of shonen characters are basically different flavors of Goku. I mean, in Tenkaichi 1 specifically, there are 7 different versions of Goku in the character roster.
Yeah.
And by Tenkaichi 3, it's like 13. But that was all in service of the game's aim to let players easily recreate basically every iconic fight throughout the entire anime from the fighter select menu.
Yep.
Also, in the spirit of that, the game was very much balanced for lore accuracy over competitive viability, something the series wouldn't achieve until the still beloved Tenkaichi 3. It's so easy to map the formula to different franchises that nowadays it kind of feels like, aside from all the Dynasty Warriors clones, that's the only sort of anime game that ever gets made, which has created some stigma around arena fighters that really isn't helped by things like Jump All-Stars and Jujutsu Kaisen Cursed Clash being obviously unfinished, barely playable abominations. But you can't really blame all that on Tenkaichi, and most fans seem genuinely hyped for the series' imminent return as Dragon Ball Sparking Zero.
Yeah.
DBZ is also presently represented by one of the tightest 2D fighters on the market,
Dragon Ball Fighters.
Fighters from Arc System Works, a game that uses all of the impressive animation techniques that the studio developed for their BlazBlue and Guilty Gear series to look pretty much exactly like the anime, like you and your buddy are choreographing an episode in real time, which is
so
a
much
little
fun.
different from actually being in the anime, but if you want that and can't wait for Sparking Zero, there's always Dragon Ball Kakarot, a single-player open-world action RPG with Tenkaichi-esque combat and a mini-game based on that episode where they go to get their
Get driver's license.
which is just the best thing ever.
Oh, I love it. Oh, with Piccolo. He was about to lose his bloody mind during that episode.
That retells the entire story from Z onward, demonstrating, if nothing else, how far graphics have come toward the very specific goal of remaking Chala Head Chala. Advancements that were driven in no small part by licensed games based on Dragon Ball or anime inspired by Dragon Ball, and original Japanese games seeking to emulate the look and feel of those very same anime. Eventually, the techniques they developed for those games would make their way back into anime, as model swapping and frame skipping unlocked the secrets of making 3D characters in 2D environments not look like complete ass. The same year Dragon Ball FighterZ dropped, Dragon Ball Super Broly featured fully 3D fight scenes that could have easily been ripped straight from an ArcSys game. In fact, the editor cut partway through that scene to Broly's dramatic finish from FighterZ, and you didn't even notice. On the subject of the new Dragon Ball movies, most folks know the story.
No. Why did you have to show this? We were doing just fine. We need more Xenoverse games. Yeah, we definitely do.
Of how Hollywood's Dragon Ball Evolution was so terrible and embarrassing that it inspired Toriyama to come out of retirement and make something better with the franchise. But what you might not know is that Funimation's short domestic run for Battle of the Gods was one of their first real theatrical success stories, and directly paved the way for more Shonen tie-in films based on the likes of Hiroaka and One Piece to get wider stateside releases, which in turn laid the groundwork for the shocking blockbuster success of the movie Kimetsu no Yaiba, Demon Slayer, Mugen Train. Even if he wasn't the face of Shonen anymore, Akira Toriyama was still making waves in the modern era and still making more Dragon Ball with his own two hands, despite his stated desire to pull back and relax a bit.
I think, like, watching the Cowboy Bebop Netflix adaptation was a chore, but like I saw a post after finishing watching that said, you know what, you might have gone through the pain of watching a show like that, but Dragon Ball Evolution was worse, to which I had a weird sigh of relief because that person was right, and somewhat I felt serene after that. That was just what I needed to have that being digestible. Because, Jesus Christ, the person who allowed that monstrosity to exist needs to be buried 6 feet under. It's an offense onto anything that is creative.
Ball Daima was supposed to just be a silly little spin-off thing without any direct involvement from him, but then when he went to sign off on it, he accidentally did a whole bunch of character design and world building work and also wrote most of the plot. So now we have quite possibly the most authentic original Dragon Ball TV show in decades to look forward to, on top of all the gorgeous animation enabled by its little guys who go around School of Character Design.
Wow.
Plus there's that sick looking Sandland game and hopefully at least a few other things that he wasn't quite ready to announce yet. Because I don't know about you, but I'm not quite ready to say goodbye yet. That may sound contradictory, given what I said in Let Goku Die almost exactly a year ago. But it just feels wrong for Toriyama-sama to be gone so soon. He was only 68. Hayao Miyazaki barely retired twice by that age.
Yeah. And in an island nation that is known for having a hell of a lot of centenaries, he surprisingly actually lived long for his job. Mangakas, was mentioned before with the creator of Berserk, they don't tend to make it that long. It's a sad fact to know, but most of them actually will not make it to 60. It is that stressful of a job. That's why every single time that us One Piece fan will have heard that Oda needed a new operation for his hand or something else, we were always fearing like, whoa, what is this man doing? Is he okay? It's weird to have that kind of parasocial relationship with an author.
Stan Lee
it is what it
hasn't
is.
even started making anime yet. Legends like Toriyama should stick around to pass their wisdom on and shit, right? He wasn't even done making awesome manga. He never really stopped, just slowed down a little once Dragon Ball was done. It's just not fair. But what's really not fair is the fact that Toriyama didn't actually die all that young, relatively speaking. In fact, a Japanese blogger crunched the numbers, and it turns out he beat the average life expectancy for men in his profession by 6 years. Most mangaka don't make it past 62.
No.
And for reference, the average life expectancy of men in Japan, a country that, by the way, has a word for when you work so hard you die, is 83. The toll that making manga takes on the bodies that make it really can't be overstated. They work grueling hours to hit brutal deadlines, and even though publishers have gotten at least a little better at easing up on the schedule, many still destroy themselves for their work, driven by passion as much as hunger, dreaming that they might one day tell a story that reaches the entire world, like Akira Toriyama, who left
Yeah, they have it rough.
us far too soon, and yet will stay with us for as long as mankind loves manga and anime. And who none of us really have to say goodbye to just yet, because he left so many differently amazing works behind. No matter your tastes or interests, I guarantee there's something with his fingerprints all over it that you haven't taken the time to appreciate yet, and you will totally love. So go read Sandland to get hyped for that game, or go get to finally playing Dragon Quest and get cultured, or play Blue Dragon if you're already cultured, or Toe Ball. Toe Ball's great.
Araki cannot die, okay? Araki is a bloody vampire. He is the embodiment of Dio. Like, the man is how old? Let me see. Hirohiko Araki. Araki is 53? No, 63. He's 63 years old. Still going strong. So, no, that man is not dying. And he does not look a day older than when he first made the freaking thing. Look at him. He's a bloody lich. Yeah. This man is not dying, okay? He is not dying. Oh, man.
Or do what I'm doing and finally give Dr. Slump a shot. I don't recommend binging it personally, though. Comedy of that caliber really deserves to be savored. And all of Akira Toriyama's work deserves to be remembered. Even the stuff that didn't change the world. So I hope this pushes more people to seek it out. I'm just one fan among legions saying thank you for changing my world.
Yeah. That was amazing, man. Yep, that was him. That was his work and how influential has been on a lot of our lives.